event, which gives us all a unique opportunity to discuss the issues of key importance for our societies, such as the climate crisis, energy transition, and strengthening participation of women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Over the last 2 years, academics around the world have been overwhelmed by the struggle against COVID-19. And I'm proud to say that the Polish Academy of Sciences has served as the major source of scientific advice for Polish society in this fight. However, we have continued and will continue to work on our top priorities, which are climate change, protecting biodiversity, the energy transition, and strengthened participation of women in academia. Therefore, it is a particularly great pleasure for me to welcome a strong advocate of energy transition, as well as of women's participation in academia, Secretary Granholm, to Warsaw, and to further advance the dialogue between scientists and decision makers aimed at tackling our joint challenges. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And now I would like to give a floor to my colleague, an excellent scholar, Professor Monika Kędra, to deliver her words of introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Secretary Granholm, Dr. Prof, Professor Duszyński, and dear distinguished guests. I have been working since early 2000 on the climate change impacts on the marine ecosystems. And that is also one of the research priorities of my workplace, Institute of Oceanology of Polish Academy of Sciences, where my colleagues and I are focusing on the climate change impacts on the European seas, and also on the role of the oceans in the climate change and the climate shaping. Also, the Polish Academy of Sciences has put climate change as one of the priorities, and the Academy has been advocating actively towards the climate change mitigation and energy transition. As my main focus is the Arctic Ocean and its ecosystems, I have been, over the recent years, able to witness multiple changes that this remote and pristine areas have been facing. The temperature rise, the sea ice retreat, it is now obvious that there is a link between these and the changes, the shifts in the ecosystem function and the biodiversity over there. And maybe it is a bit easier in those remote areas where the temperature rise is particularly high to notice these links. But we have to remember that the climate change is common everywhere. And for example, in Poland, we are facing changes, increasing temperatures, more and more common weather, strong weather events that are getting more common and more harmful for the societies. And because of that, in order to mitigate these changes, to protect the societies, the planet, the nature, we need urgent actions and a dialogue between decision makers and the science, because these changes needs to be based on the scientific advice and the scientific knowledge. It is, by now, there is a consensus that the way to do that is through the limitation of our CO2 emissions. And to do that, we need to transit towards the clean energy and sustained development. But this can be this can be expensive or be perceived as very expensive on a short term. Therefore, this scientific advice is really crucial, and the dialogue between the society, the stakeholders, and the scientists is really crucial. I would like to point out that the Polish Academy of Sciences is also involved in this dialogue, and just as one example of this involvement, I would like to mention the Polish Academy of Sciences involvement in COP24 in Katowice in 2018, where Polish Academy of Sciences co-chaired a symposium on safeguarding our climate, advancing our society. The society is also a very crucial part in these processes. Luckily, the awareness is increasing. So by now, most of the Polish citizens are aware of the climate change, and actually over almost 60% want to stop energy based on the coal. However, I really want to point out that in order to be successful in these transitions, we also need to involve all of our resources in our society. And by that, I actually mean the involvement of female scientists in the decision-making and in STEM and science. Over many years, we have been neglecting or impeding women's participation in decision-making and in the scientific processes. However, this is now changing, maybe not fast enough, but we see the progress here. And I would like to call upon higher involvement and higher participation of female scientists. Due to our little bit different experience and maybe a little bit different perspective, we really have a lot to bring to the table. And once again, I would like to stress the importance of the dialogue between the scientists and the decision makers, and that the decisions should be made upon the scientific advice and the sound scientific evidence. And by saying that, I would like now to introduce the Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm. It is really my pleasure to welcome here our noble guest, who is a strong advocate of all these important issues that I have mentioned in my talk: the energy transition, the strengthening of the dialogue between the science and the decision makers, and last but not least, the participation of women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Secretary Granholm, please.
Thank you so much. President Duszyński, thank you so very much for this invitation. I am grateful to be here, and grateful to be here among three great women scientists, and probably a lot more that I just don't know you. So I'm sure that there is just a massive amount of leadership in science, technology, engineering, and math in this room. So it's great to be with you. We're obviously very supportive of what goes on here at the Academy, and especially to expand that pipeline. You know, we just came from the Maria Skłodowska-Curie Museum, and I just have to reflect for one moment on that. You know, it's one thing to be brilliant and to discover and to win the Nobel Prize, but it is another thing to be the first. It is another thing to be a woman discovering at a time when women were not allowed to even be professors. And it is another thing to have achieved that kind of level, having gone through what she went through in her life. You know, her mother died when she was 10 years old. Her older sister died when she was 7 years old. She was here, obviously, during a very fraught time where women were not allowed to even be educated at university. And yet she went to the flying university, you know, flew from place to place here, underground, so that she could learn. And she had parents who simply did not allow her to have boundaries. You know, I mean, who simply said to her, by their example, but I'm sure by their words, that don't color within the lines. You don't have to live in the box that's been constructed for you by others. You can do anything. Question, ask. Often, because I was the first Attorney General of Michigan, I was the first governor of Michigan, I'm the second Secretary of Energy who's a woman, all women. I often get asked by young women if they want to seek office, you know, what's your advice? And one of the things that I say to them is, go see the movie Wonder Woman. And the reason I say that is not just because it's a fun movie, but because she came from an island of women who were problem solvers, and when she lands in a society that is dominated by men, she's just extremely curious. Why is it this way? That makes no sense. You want me to wear that? That is ridiculous. And it's that kind of questioning and not being defined by others that Maria Curie represents, in addition to all of her other brilliance. So part of what I wanted to reflect on is the importance of having decision-making that includes voices that are not just the norm, right? You referenced this, that diversity in STEM, diversity in thought is so important. There was some research, I was just looking this morning, and you are familiar with this, but in this context, I think it's interesting, that just from a couple years ago, the Kellogg School of Management did some research, and they found, no surprise, that teams make better decisions than individuals, right? Teams make better decisions 66% of the time. All male teams, if you just have men, they make better decisions too if they're a team than an individual. They make better decisions about 58% of the time. Gender diverse teams make better decisions 73% of the time. And further, teams that are diverse ethnically, geographically, age-wise, they make better decisions 87% of the time. So if you have diversity, then you just get better results. Then you have people who are not thinking inside the box. And so I'm really excited to be able to, we lead a fantastic organization at the Department of Energy. And it's because it's a science organization. We have 17 national labs, 95,000 people who are working to try to solve the biggest problems, especially related to climate. We are continuing to work on our own diversity inside. And I have to give hats off to Christopher Davis, who's here, who has been one of our key people in identifying fabulous talent to be able to move us forward. I'm going to introduce you to one of them in just a minute. But of the appointees that we've made, because you have to work this over time, right? Vacancy comes and you make sure you find the best people to fill. And we've had really fortunate results. 60% of our new hirees are women or people of color, people of diverse backgrounds, LGBTQ people. So we are really pushing for diversity in our own ranks. And it's a question for STEM fields overall. It's the same issue that appears over and over again, right? How do you get more women to be involved, more people of color, more people from underrepresented backgrounds? I mean, one of our labs, just as one example, which I'm very proud of, it's at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Lab. And they know that they've got a problem. They're right in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is dominated by men, largely, right? So they know they have a problem, and they want to especially attract women. And so they do a summer camp for high school juniors women at underrepresented schools. And what they do is they bring them to the lab, they expose them to things that these women just were not, all of these women did not raise their hand to say, I want to study STEM. In fact, they were in a totally different place, but they were nominated by a professor who saw something, and they come to the lab, and 90% of them, when they're finished, choose a STEM major in college. That's fantastic. It's really diversity necessitates vigilant inclusion. You can't just assume that things will happen on their own. You have to lead to be able to do the outreach that is necessary to overcome systemic and structural barriers that exist. And it's not necessarily the rule of law like it was during Maria Curie's time. It is the stuff that's between the ears that is more difficult to overcome. So that's why we have to reach out and we have to be aggressive. Women in the United States make up only 27% of the STEM workforce. We have lots of work to do. But on the question of diversity, geographic diversity is important too, and this is why I want to just say a word about why we're here, why my team is here in Poland, because we went to the Partnership for Atlantic Climate Cooperation Symposium yesterday, organized with great help from our US Embassy, Bix Aliu, our Chargé d'Affaires here. Fantastic, because we had membership from, I want to say, 24 countries in Eastern and Central Europe, all trying to crack the code on how we get to net zero carbon economies, and how do we get there in a way that allows this transition to happen and considers the people who are involved in addition to the climate. And when you have that many people around the table who are struggling to solve a problem, you get better outcomes. You get better decisions. And so that diversity of cooperation is really important as we all try to solve the biggest existential crisis facing us. So, bottom line is cooperation and collaboration reach better decisions. Having female role models makes you reach better decisions too, and I want to introduce one of those role models. Dr. Katie Huff is head of our Office of Nuclear Energy. You're probably the first woman who's head of that office.
Actually, no.
No? Oh, I'm so glad to hear it.
Me too.
But we did bring her in because she is just fantastic, a hero to many, including me, because she is such a fantastic scientist and an enthusiastic supporter of nuclear energy. And I was thrilled to be able to take my picture alongside her and the statue of Maria Curie just a moment ago. So I hope you will give a warm welcome to a wonderful role model in STEM, Dr. Katie Huff.
Thanks so much. I'll keep my comments fairly brief because I know we have a lot of questions, but first I'd like to thank the Polish Academy of Sciences, President Doctor. It's really an honor to be here. It's an even more incredible honor to look out at all of you. You seem like the people I would be thrilled to have as my colleagues. I am absolutely thrilled to see so many academic women here in the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics Center of Poland. I, up till about 5 months ago, was a professor of nuclear engineering. My research is in modeling and simulation of advanced nuclear reactors and their fuel cycles, questions around how they should work, how you couple multiphysics inside those reactors and simulations, how to recycle nuclear fuel and things of this nature. And a few months ago, I joined the Department of Energy, and I have to say, it's been one of the most exciting experiences of my life because I'm able to now implement some of the things I know as a scientist to truly affect the world. And it is a real honor to work with Secretary Granholm in an institution that truly values diversity. There are many women in the positions leading the offices of energy efficiency and renewable energy, and our fossil and carbon management office, and the list goes on. And I have never worked in such a diverse and driven group of people. And in the same way that the Department of Energy values diversity in people, our approach to the transition, as Secretary Granholm was saying, incorporates a diversity of solutions as well. It's going to take every single technology to fight climate change, to mitigate carbon. Dr. Kędra also noticed this. Our approach has to be inclusive of anything that is going to help us solve the problem and anyone that is going to help us solve these problems. We need expertise of all kinds, biologists and chemists and social scientists and philosophers and political scientists, and all of us are going to have to work together. And I have to say, working in the Department of Energy over these last 5 months has shown me that it really does work. These decisions made by diverse teams are happening all the time at really high levels of leadership within our office. And I have to say, I can tell that you're all doing that here as well. I was just shown the Akademia booklet around your energy transition research that seems to be happening here, and it is exactly along the lines of what we're envisioning, a really broad scope of hydrogen solutions and diverse energy sources, and an emphasis on clean energy like nuclear energy, but also renewables and wind. Anyway, I'll keep my comments to that, but I'll share just one minor personal note. When I think about diversity and being a woman in science, I always feel like I'm cheating a little bit, because the first engineer that I ever met was my mother. And I think not everyone has that advantage. She worked in power systems, building turbines her whole life, and it was just the most natural thing in the world for me to become an engineer. And I'm really hopeful, looking out at this crowd, that lots of people in the next generation will also feel that the most natural thing in the world is to be much like perhaps their mother or their aunt or their sister who is a scientist. And so I'm so pleased to see all of you, because there are many, many more out there who see you and think of this as the most natural thing in the world. All right, thanks.
Madam Secretary, Dr. Huff, thank you so much for the inspiring remarks. We have 15 minutes left, so I would propose to open the question and answer session. We have asked our participants to pre-submit questions in advance of this meeting to save a little bit of time. So I would like to move on to the first question, which came from Kinga Gruszecka from the Polish Space Agency. Kinga, are you here with us? Oh, wonderful, thank you. So I'll read your question just in order of brevity. While young people are quite aware of climate change and the needs concerning it, they often don't understand how, while working in STEM, they may support ongoing or further actions, future actions. What are your thoughts on this, and does the Department of Energy address this issue somehow? Yes, to Madam Secretary, or whoever is, or maybe Dr. Huff as well.
Thank you for the question. I think, if I understood that correctly, you're right. Young people get the urgency of climate change. And often, if you go into STEM, you're not exactly sure where I'm going to have the biggest impact or what is. And the amazing thing is, we don't know exactly what, there's not one silver bullet. There is, as I say, silver buckshot. That meaning that there is just a lot of solutions. And I think that in our labs, anyway, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, we are doing both. We are working on today, deploying what's there today that everybody knows about, and we're looking, 10 years, 20 years down the road. For example, we just launched publicly, and this gets to your question about how do I know what to work on. We want to get people excited, for example, about clean hydrogen. And so we launched what we call an earth shot, a hydrogen earth shot, which is to reduce the cost of clean hydrogen by 80% to $1 for 1 kilogram within 1 decade. If you put that out publicly, then it starts to rally people to get interested in it. So a series of challenges like that are the things that we are working on. Same thing with energy storage, for example, utility scale energy storage. We want to reduce the cost of that by 90% within the decade, so that we say it publicly, so we get scientists and labs and universities looking at what are the ways we can do that. So launching of challenges is one way to do that, obviously. And I often say, for those who are not in STEM and you want to know the best way that you can impact the climate, it is to exercise your democratic right to put people in office who care about this issue, because without sufficient majorities, we are not going to get the policy necessary to deploy the scientific discoveries that we know are important.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Eliza Przeździecka, representing Warsaw School of Economics. Eliza, could you show by raise of hands? Hi. The question is, what are the critical challenges on the path from fossil fuels to renewables in Poland? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen in the last few days here that there are a lot of opportunities for Poland to decarbonize a significant quantity of your coal. I know that the government is thinking about nuclear energy, which of course personally is very exciting for me, and we're very pleased to imagine that clean source of energy displacing the coal that underpins a lot of your baseload energy. It will make a big dent in decarbonization, but I think there's an extraordinary amount of energy transition research done sort of right next to me. Do you have any comments on Poland's?
Maybe because I'm not really an energy transition expert, I would only like to make a comment that I think our society and the scientists over here are really ready to make the step, and all we really need now is to strengthen the dialogue with the decision makers to actually take the action.
Okay, the next question on the list comes from Dominika Fox-Matulewicz from the American Chamber of Commerce. Hello, Dominika. And the question from Dominika is, what skills and areas of knowledge should today's young girls focus on and develop in order to become the leaders and decision makers of tomorrow?
Obviously, there's substantive areas of knowledge that they should follow their yearning for. But I do say that I think it's important for everybody, but particularly women, to take a course in leadership, because often it's not just the science of management of people, but it is understanding how you don't have to think inside the box. It's giving people, often, if it's a good leadership class, it's giving people permission, right? I mean, it depends, because you can have lousy ones too. But if you have a class that understands what true leadership is, it's not just occupying a position of authority. You can lead from anywhere on the totem pole of life, right? And so giving people permission to do that, which is sort of getting back to my earlier comments about thinking outside the box and saying this doesn't always have to be this way, is important. I also think it's really important to read books on leadership as well, and I have one to recommend. I would say if you haven't gotten the book by Kouzes and Posner, it's called The Leadership Challenge, and that book really is a great sort of primer on leading. And I think leadership is not just something that you acquire over time. I think you have to be intentional about it and think about it. And so that, I think, is a really important skill for men and women, but I think women who often sit in the back and who often don't raise their hand in school, et cetera, we know all of the statistics about that. And watch the TED Talk by Amy Cuddy about leaning, about occupying the space and making sure that you are, your body language corresponds to what you want to be. So that's what I would say.
Can I ask you a favor to send us few copies of this book, and I will distribute.
Maybe I can also make a comment. I would just like to make a call to all the female scientists we have here, and to ourselves as well, that we need to reach out to our friends and also to young girls, women, just to show them that yes, it is possible to be a successful female scientist. And if you are thinking about it, you should just go for it.
One more thing. I would say, just to build on that, you know, women, when you're in those positions of leadership, and obviously as professors you are, and you get this, but often in the business world this is not true. You can't climb your ladder, break through the glass ceiling, you know, brush the shards of glass out of your hair, and then kick away the ladder. You have to bring others along with you and mentor other women. So that is such an important part of leadership.
Thank you so much. The next question comes actually from me and from my colleagues at the Academy. So we see that in many academies around the world, there is still a very limited number of female members. And this changes very slowly. What are your thoughts on using the quota system in the academies?
You know, I haven't thought about that. I think that, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I'm curious about you thinking, what you think about it, because you're in this business.
I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Yes. And I know that Dutch Academy went this way, and it improved the participation of women. But of course, it's not very popular, and actually the resistance is what you said about the lever, keeping it while you are on the top. It is also a problem. But if I may have one comment, you are from Department of Energy, and of course, you are thinking about producing energy, cheaper, better, cleaner, and so on. But we have also to think about something like using energy at our households, consuming energy. There is no question to me that we have limit also this part. And this is also extremely important, you know, direction. So these both vectors should somehow meet somewhere at much lower level of energy, giving big burden to the climate. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, at the risk of having my opinion, please note this doesn't represent.
It's all right.
It doesn't.
It's good. Nobody's voting for you. Don't worry.
I think it's incredibly important in academia, especially, to ensure that the perception of quotas is not misunderstood. The intention of such things needs to be to lower the barriers, not the standards. And it needs to be incredibly clear to everyone understanding these quotas that no one's standards have been lowered. It's simply like lowering the barriers to specific people entering. And I think in a lot of societies, like National Academies type societies, a part of the problem is structural in terms of who is nominated must be someone that is known to that initial group. And so it's as you all understand it, you tend to nominate people who are just like you, and this is part of the core barrier. And if we just lower those barriers, we need not lower any standards. And I think communicating that very clearly is important.
Thank you. The last question, the final question for today, comes from Jolanta Niedźwiecka, an environmental microbiologist. Hello, Jolanta. And the question is, what advice would you give to young women who want to start a political career?
Okay, in addition to watching Wonder Woman, here's what I would say, what I do say, is that I think when you are in a political position, you are obviously leading people, and you're not going to be a good leader unless you really understand what they are experiencing or that you have gone through yourself. So I tell, again, young women, that put yourself, if you haven't experienced pain in your life, put yourself in a position to see other people's pain. Just a quick example of this. You know, when I was Attorney General, which is a law enforcement position, and I was trying to get people to recruit mentors for young people who were chronically truant from school as sort of the first indicator that they might enter eventually into the criminal justice system. You want to make sure they're in school. So you want to mentor an adult who cares about you. And in order to recruit others, of course, I had to walk the talk. So I was teamed up with a young woman named Brittany at 8 years old. She lived in the upper flat of a boarded up house. Her mother was a heroin addict. Her father was not in the picture, and she was chronically truant from school because her mother could not get up in the morning to take her to school. And through the course of my mentoring her, her mother died of the overdose. She was put into foster care. I saw the foster care system from the inside. She lost what we say is the ovarian lottery. She was born into a situation that certainly was not her fault. The first time we met, the mentoring agency gave us a sheet of paper with 50 activities that you could do with a mentor. Go to the park, go to an aquarium, go, play ball. She checked off every single one of the 50 things because she just wanted someone to care about her, to see her, to be with her. I say that because I still mentor her. She's now 31 years old, and she is a single mother of 2. In a very poor area. She earns minimum wage. I see her life all the time. I see and feel her pain all the time. That experience of mentoring her made me run for governor because I knew the system had to be fixed. I take that with me. I take her stories in my backpack with me. It's seared on my soul how she lives and how being poor is so expensive in America. My point is, if one wants to run for office, you have to believe and see other people's pain. In fact, and was that the last question? Okay, I'm just going to end with this quote from the book that I just cited to you, Kouzes and Posner, because it's relevant to that question and really to the life of Maria Curie and all of you. And the quote is this: name any great leader, performer, scientist, athlete, activist, citizen. Chances are that the crucible of that person's crowning achievement was some distressing crisis, some wrenching change, tragic misfortune, or risky venture. Only challenge produces the opportunity for greatness. May you all be so great.
Sadly, we have many more questions on the list, but sadly we have to finish our meeting. Madam Secretary, it's been an honor and a great pleasure to have you with us at the Polish Academy of Sciences. Thank you so much for all your time. Thanks to you and Dr. Huff for answering the questions from our audience. Also a big thank you to Monika and Jerzy for being with us, and also to you for your participation. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you again in the Polish Academy of Sciences whenever you have time. Thank you. I would like to also ask the US delegation to head to the cars that are already waiting for you.